Ding dong YouTube, welcome back to the channel. I am the Jobless Coder, and today we are going to be covering a little bit of Canadian politics. Now this video is going to be a little bit different for those who have subscribed to the channel. Recently, within the last month, I've been doing this series of videos covering daily updates and information regarding the evacuees of the Charleston residents. That was anyone that was employed for the Lake Louise ski resort who lost everything on the 3rd of July when our house was the victim of an arson attack. And so for those people that have subscribed to this channel, this video is a little bit different because it's political and economic. For those people that were subscribed to the channel previously, this video is a lot more in line with the types of topic and content that I put out on this channel, which is mostly in three areas. That's political, economic, and technological are the three primary topics that I have historically covered on this channel as they relate to my life and, a lot of people's lives in the case of covering, COVID political issues during that period of time between 2020 and 2022, really. This video is covering what I am describing as a rare Trudeau win. For anybody that has been subscribed to the channel for a while, you know that I am not very much a fan of Trudeau. In fact, I don't think a lot of people who live in Canada are. I don't know of anyone personally who actually voted for him. But in this particular instance, it can be considered a case of a broken clock is right twice a day. And this is in regards to a tweet that he put out yesterday on his Twitter account announcing that he is now suspending all interest payments on Canadian student loans. Now, whether or not this affects the provincial student loans, I don't really know. Student loan debt is a big topic that I've covered on the channel before. In fact, I put out a documentary, pretty much, an hour-and-a-half long documentary last year on this topic called My Borrowed Future, and you can see that video here if you're inclined. And this was partly a review of Dave Ramsey's documentary film that he put out called Borrowed Future, and partly an hour-and-a-half long rant about student debt and essentially everything that I have wrong with that. And I personally hold the opinion that education should not be a for-profit industry. And this is an opinion that is shared by a lot of other people in the political sphere, especially big-name personalities like Tim Pool. He says, it's perfectly acceptable to expect that the principal is paid back on a student loan, but the fact that they're charging interest on it seems like a very corrupt practice that is predatory against students. And I know you can make the argument that students who have degrees are the highest earners in the country, and whether that's in America or in Canada, that may actually be true on a broad scale. But on the individual per person basis, I can find you any number of people. For everyone who has a degree, who has a six-figure job, I'll find you one person who has a degree who works at McDonald's, and one person who has a degree that doesn't even have a job, they're unemployed. That was me for several years. Not that I had a degree, but that I had education, formal education, 3 years at university before dropping out, and now I'm 20 grand in debt for a degree I don't even have. And as I indicated in my previous videos, and I have mentioned several times on this channel, that is debt that I intend to take with me to the grave. And that is for a wide variety of different personal and financial, political reasons. I don't think that it should be a for-profit industry. So the fact that they're charging interest on it is something that I don't agree with. Now, having said that, now that Trudeau has gone and removed the interest on that, I may actually start paying back my student loan because there's no interest. Mind you, it'll be at a rate of $1 per year, but that's a lot more than the $0 per year that I had otherwise committed to repaying. Now, I don't know whether or not this affects the provincial student loans, as I also have loans with the Alberta government. When you go to apply for a student loan, it's broken into two, and you don't get a say in this. You request a certain amount of money, and then the government decides how much of that is coming from the federal student loan program and how much of that is coming from the provincial student loan program. So divided into two, it's roughly half and half, about $10,000 to $15,000 of federal loans and about $10,000 of provincial loans. So as I understand it correctly, in Trudeau's tweet, only the federal loans are the ones that are having the debt and interest payments absolved from that. Now, it's not exactly debt relief or forgiveness entirely. The student loans still exist there, but me personally, I don't really have a reason to pay them back because number one, I don't have a degree, and so paying for something that I don't even have doesn't make a lot of sense. It's like you take out a loan for a car and then you don't get a car. Why would you continue paying the loan on the car that you don't have? You take out a mortgage, but there's no house at the end of that mortgage. So you're still paying mortgage for a house you don't own? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So that's my personal view on it. I know there's a bunch of people that are really angry on Twitter and they go on these rants, oh, why don't I get relief and forgiveness on the interest payments for my mortgage or my car loan or this loan or that loan? It's like, well, do you have the thing that the loan was taken out for? If you have the house, then what are you complaining about? If you have the car, what are you complaining about? Now, I know I'm not exclusive in the sense that I'm not the only one in the country who has loans for a degree they don't have because they dropped out or they failed or whatever the situation is, but the fact that that debt is still hung over you like this weighted anvil swinging back and forth, it serves to keep you down. You know, I turned 26 in July, just a few days after the fire, and I'm going to be 28 in a couple years. That was the age that my dad got married, was at 28. And part of that marriage was an agreement that the two of them, my mom and my dad, were going to purchase a property together to live in. And so that was not the first property that my father owned. He had been buying houses and apartment buildings left, right, and center up until that point. I think as early as 20 years old, he had purchased that. But a whole generation of people who are my age are never going to be able to afford a house. And if they do, it's going to be after 40 years of paying back student loans. And then when they're on the age of retirement, then they might be able to afford enough or a mortgage for their first house. And then they'll live in it for a couple years before they die because now they're 68 or 70 years old. So the fact that that kind of constraint has been put on a lot of people, whether it's millennials or Gen Z. I'm part of the Generation Z, and so it's very unfortunate to have those interests held over that. Now, whether or not this affects student loan payments in America, we have yet to see. It's entirely possible that Biden could take some, let's say, liberation from this to do it on his own terms in America, especially given that student debt relief or forgiveness or complete absolution was part of his campaign promise, which he has yet to fulfill on, and a lot of people are very upset with him for that. But for Trudeau to come out and do this, I will give him the win. Now, does that mean that it buys my vote? Absolutely not. I will never, under any circumstances, vote for that man. And so it's entirely possible that it could just be a vote buying technique on his regard to convince people to vote for him. I'll take the win and I'll walk away and say thank you for your service, but I'm going to vote for Pierre instead. Now, whether Pierre comes into office in 2024 or 2025, whenever the Canadian election is held next, assuming it's not held sooner, and he undoes this, that's entirely possible, and that's something that you have to kind of weigh on both sides of things. But you know, whether there's interest on the loan or whether there's no interest on the loan, it doesn't really impact my life at all anyways, because the consequences of not paying the loan back is that I have a low credit score, and that's about it. It doesn't impact my life at all. It never prevented my ability to come out to Lake Louise and get a job at the ski resort. It's not preventing my ability to go and vacation in Orlando next month. I'm doing a week-long trip entirely funded on tips. I'm not taking out a loan for that or anything. And yeah, maybe I'm not going to be able to purchase $100,000 car off of the lot of a dealership, which is only going to be worth 10 grand in 4 years from then. But you know, in some cases that might actually be a benefit, that you don't get yourself into that kind of financial position purchasing a car that's going to be valueless in a couple years, and that's whether you wreck it or not. It's just going to the property and everything, you know, your houses and I don't know, like I mean, my brother bought a house and that, but he's got like a $70,000 a year job that affords him that. So it seems like at least in my opinion, something like a credit score really only matters if you're kind of in that kind of pay scale, like $70,000, $80,000, six figures a year and above, that it actually makes a difference. Because I had a decent credit score when I moved to Vancouver. I had a credit card for many years that I had been paying off on time to keep my credit score high. And then when I actually needed a loan, to move to Vancouver, because it cost all this money for down payments on the property and the first month's rent up front, and then you have to buy food and furniture, and all this stuff costs money that I didn't have. I went to the bank and they basically told me to go fuck myself. So, and that was with a good credit score. That was before any of this, fell apart. Because while I did have loans at the time, and so there was debt accrued, it wasn't gone into what's the word I'm looking for? It wasn't gone into uh, whenever the loan goes into like debt collections or whatever, when you don't pay it back after a certain number of years. It wasn't at that point yet, and so there was really no reason for them. I just got a brand new job working in Vancouver, making $5,000 a year. There was literally no reason for them to deny me a loan, and yet they did. So how did I pay for it? I took out a student loan, and then instead of using that money to pay for the education, I used it to move to Vancouver. And then 10 months later my life fell apart when the whole company imploded, and all of that persisted afterwards. So led to 4 years of unemployment before coming out here. But a lot of people, like I said before, they have a degree, they work at McDonald's, or they don't even have any job at all, or they're living paycheck to paycheck. And so not being able to even set $100 aside every month to pay back the loan, how are they ever going to get ahead if there's that interest payment that is held over it? Because I'll tell you, I was working for 2 years prior to moving out here for this client in Toronto area, and he was paying me about $1,000 a month on average. And then it just kept going down and down and down until my final month of working for him, he paid me 64 bucks. Not $64 for the day of work, not for the week of work, for the entire month of work is what he paid me, $64. So how the hell am I supposed to pay back student debt with that? Even at $1,000, that's not a lot of money. And so all of that money gets put into other things, and then you're living paycheck to paycheck. Oh, there's no money left for the debt. And the consequences of that is having a low or having a low credit score. In which case, what can you do? It's like, oh, you're never going to be able to buy a house. Well, newsflash, I'm never going to be able to afford a house anyways, unless I have that six-figure job, which comes through getting a job in tech, which, as anyone that's followed this channel, has been an exceptionally difficult, if not downright impossible, task of mine that I have not yet fulfilled, this desire to work in the tech industry. And so, yeah, maybe in 20 years, if I can get a six-figure job in tech, then it would make a difference to have a high credit score where you can purchase a house. But other than that, I just anticipate going to my grave having never ever purchased a property in my entire life. I'm just going to be renting forever, or in this case, living at a ski resort, because the money for the rent, as you would put it, rent comes automatically out of the paycheck. So I don't even have to set money aside from my paycheck to budget and make sure that I have enough money to pay the rent. It just is automatically deducted, and then it's peace of mind. You don't even have to think about it. So that's one of the huge benefits of working here, or at any ski resort in that matter, because I believe all of them operate the same way, is that they just deduct the money for the rent from your paycheck. So you're not having to worry about, oh, I need to pay off this loan, but I also don't have enough money. So now it's like, well, you make the decision. Do you want to put food on the table, or do you want to have a high credit score? Well, in most cases, I think the majority of people would put food on the table first. And then maybe if you're lucky, if you have money at the end of the month, you can put it towards the student loan. So at least that's my opinion on it. I mean, I've dealt with debt collectors, and they're all predatory fucks. They all always say the same thing. Oh, you should borrow money from your parents or someone else to pay us back. And it's like, so your solution to getting out of debt is to get into more debt with just a different client instead? No, fuck that. That's stupid. I'm not going to borrow money from my parents to pay off my student debt, because now I owe money to my parents. And yeah, it may not be interest levied like student debt was prior to this, but now it's like people are on Twitter saying, what's the incentive of paying back the student loan? Well, honestly, what was the incentive of paying it back anyways. Unless you actually got a six-figure job with that degree, or you even completed the degree, what's the point of paying it back? Oh, so you can have a high credit score? Whoop-de-doo! What are you going to do with a high credit score and no assets or no liabilities? Or sorry, lots of liabilities, no assets. Because that's what the bank told me, that I needed to have approximately, or they would only fund up to 20% of my total assets. So I'm looking for a $5,000 loan. They need me to have $25,000 worth of assets. And I'm like, that's bullshit. If I needed $5,000 to move and I had $25,000 worth of stuff that I could sell 5%, or 5%, sell 1/5 of it, 20% of the things you own to fund it. You don't need to go to a bank to get a loan in that case, but that was their policy that they told me. So that was my experience trying to get a loan, having good credit at the time. So now I'd have bad credit and definitely will never get a loan, and so it doesn't make a difference anyways whether the credit's good or bad, whether I pay the loan back or not. But that is how I view it, basically. And so that's why I just wanted to put out this information out there for anyone in Canada to be aware that your student loans no longer have debt. Yes, I know people are going to be upset if they spent their entire life working and they just paid it back and everything. It's like, well, that's your problem, you know? What are you complaining about? If you were the person who did that, then that means that you had a sufficiently, what's the word I'm looking for? Profitable enough job that you could afford to do that, because not everyone who even has a job can afford to do that. As I mentioned, if you're living paycheck to paycheck and part of your paycheck is unable to go towards the student debt because you're busy paying rent, and so like, what are you complaining about? If you had covered your debt and had paid it back entirely, that means that you have a really good job and you have a really good life and you have nothing to complain or worry about. So to be upset that, oh, these people are getting it off easy, it's like, really? This is for the people like me who have been shoved so far down the hole of society. We've fallen through literally all of the cracks in society, and so this helps people like me in my situation. It's not like I'm making six figures a year and I'm just like, oh, I just refuse to pay back the loan just because I don't have to, and then, oh, this is benefiting me or the people that are in that category. Sure, maybe a few people make $1 million a year and they still have student debt, like Ocasio-Cortez. I think she has $20,000 of student debt and she's a freaking senator or whatever. And so, like, it's ridiculous, right, that everyone seems to assume that everyone who went to school is part of that upper elite class. Meanwhile, here I've been homeless 3 times and now I have a job washing dishes in the back of a kitchen when I really want to be doing computer stuff with my life, but I can never seem to make it work. So that's my situation, at least. Let me know in the comments below if you're one of those people who went to school and essentially got nothing out of it, and now are in thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of dollars of debt for doing so. So if you think this is a good thing that Trudeau has come out and eliminated the interest payments on that, then you can actually start affording your student loan and maybe actually pay it back in a time frame sooner than 30 years. Let me know in the comments below what you think. And yes, I know Trudeau is horrible and I will definitely not be voting for him regardless of what he does policy-wise. So with that, I want to thank everyone for watching the video, and make sure to tune into the channel for more news or anything else that comes up. Until then, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.